Okie dokie. Oh, is it gonna let me? It might not let me work on this to see if Cammy. No. Hey, babe. Babe.
What?
I realized that I cannot use the story map because it's not on Cammy. So if I click on it, it's just a picture.
Yeah. So you can put text boxes over it, or you have to open it.
No, you can't.
Then you have to open it in Cammy.
You don't have Cammy on here.
You can't just open a tab and go to Cammy.
You don't have Cammy on here. I'd have to make an account.
You can use the free version.
You'd have to make an account.
Okay.
Wants all these things. Ew. Sure. 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 There we go. It's just so bright. Okay. I'm just gonna get started. Do you need me to move that? There you go. Now you have a place to sit. Where did all of these go? I knew something was missing out of here. The fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fight. What? Pretty sure. Age, world, SES. Anything else I'm missing in here? No. Okay. Let's see. Babe, can I get my tea? Yeah. Thank you. This whole box needs to be highlighted.
Hello, hello.
Isn't there a way to highlight this whole box?
Yes. Probably.
Why is the whole cell not getting... Why am I unable to find out how to fill this box?
Maybe it doesn't let you.
No, it totally
Maybe it's
does.
a paint fill option.
I tried.
I don't know then, because that'd be my guess.
I'm like missing a whole set of tools when I click on this box.
I don't know.
Huh. You purring?
Oh yeah, he's purring.
Yeah, it only does. Interesting. Interesting.
Oh damn, he fell.
Why are you dropping the baby?
I thought he'd catch himself.
Clearly not.
Clearly not. Hey, don't bite me.
See, I'm able to fill in, see how these ones are filled, but why couldn't I not? I have no idea. Careful.
I'm gonna come in here.
Okay. Yeah, no one's on yet, but I'm just starting to fill in stuff. Come on. Okay. When I start seeing people get on, I will definitely start talking and doing stuff. But for now, I'm just gonna sit and chill. Unless you want to talk.
I'm always down to talk.
Oh wait, why is it? There it is. It wasn't coming up.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you the viewer on here?
Probably.
Are you on it?
I was.
Oh, okay.
I don't know where I put my phone now.
I wish it could show you who was watching. Also, it's using very little of the screen. Weird. Like if you look at look, there's this whole chunk of screen.
Yeah, that's just how it is.
Oh, I see. Okay. Whoops. Do you want to help me organize my story?
Sure. I can stop doing what I'm doing.
I was just gonna ask you if you want to help me.
What would you like help with?
I need to go through the Rising Action events.
Okay.
Because I think that's where I'm stuck right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because the climax is that the Amazons experience overwhelming trauma and manipulation to bend to Ares. But what are all the events coming up to that? And so far we have that Gale's a new secondborn and unable to find her patron. We have the storm, the hurricane.
Yeah.
So hurricane comes... hurricane, I guess, exposes Gale's patron.
Yeah.
Statue. Causing unrest. Also, this is just so tiny.
It do be that way.
Can I make this a little bit bigger? I wish that there were people on here so that I could make this an official kind of like announcement of what exactly it is that I'm doing. Just because I feel like I'm jumping into stuff without explaining it. So if people come back to watch it, they won't really understand what's going on because I haven't explained the story at all.
I know.
Should I go through that process even though no one's watching? I can explain it to you.
Yeah.
Okay. So my original inspiration for this story was a lot of what I was seeing through COVID and the level of ignorance that everyone started realizing that they have, and the fact that we are so many years into BLM and reproductive rights and, you know, rebalancing education and LGBTQ rights and trans rights. We're so far, like 3 years into this being projected into common day American society, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say before COVID, it always existed. It's always existed. The amount of ignorance and intolerance and systematic racism, all these things, right? But it wasn't until COVID when we were locked in our homes and people were literally going through protests, and then there was riots, and I think that the world kind of unveiled during COVID. And so my inspiration for this story really came from this ability to no longer be ignorant. If you are ignorant at this point, it's almost a choice, right? To not educate yourself.
Okay.
And I wanted to live kind of in this fantasy world where that ignorance didn't exist, where people didn't hurt people, and where it was more of like a paradise. And when Wonder Woman came out prior to the pandemic, I think I cried like 3 separate times throughout that movie. Not necessarily like sad or happy or anything. It was kind of a revelation of how women are viewed in our society. I remember there was specifically the first time that I cried in Wonder Woman was they were on one of the battlefields, and she realized that there was a town in danger. The Nazis were gonna blow it up, and so she wanted to attempt to go forward, to run forward, charge, and start beating people up. And the man who had escorted her off of the Mascara, the Amazonian island, had been like, "What are you doing? We need to go together, and we're all gonna die if we push forward. So you need to stay back here." Like, he was commanding her to stay back here. And in my brain, that made sense, because it was like, yeah, you should all go together, whatever. But Wonder Woman was so aware of her abilities and so confident in herself and what she had been taught, the way she had grown up, and her own body, trusting herself. She looked at him and she had just said no. And then charged forward, slaughtered the bad guys, and saved the town. And it was that moment that she said no that I first started like tearing up, because I would have never thought that that was an option. I've never, like, when we tell someone no, especially when it comes to men, we're telling them no because we're in such a significant situation where we're trying to establish a boundary. And the boundary that she established was, you can't tell me what to do in this situation because I know what's best. And it was best. It wasn't like she was taught a lesson about staying, in line. She actually did what she was able to do. And again, that trust within herself was really beautiful to see, because I don't think a lot of women get to experience trusting themselves. I know that I haven't. And that's probably why it hit me so emotionally, is especially in the way that I grew up. If my parents ever told me what to do, it wasn't a no. It was, oh, I understand your point of view, and I'll try to make it work. And then oftentimes it would fail, because I was listening to someone else's plan of what I should do, and I wasn't trusting myself. Now, another part of where this specific story came from is I've done an incredible amount of work on my brain, on being self-aware, on healing, on improving myself. I think that's something that people don't often take into consideration when they're going through therapy or growth, is they're looking at healing and they're looking at better understanding their past and how it's made them who they are today, but they also need to put in the time and the effort to improve themselves. Healing isn't going to suddenly make you a better person. Healing is not going to make you have better reactions. You have to be self-aware, and then you need to heal, of course, but then you need to start realizing where your faults are and how that has affected other people, because your trauma can hurt other people. So I was starting to think about the American society, especially the American society, and how we've treated minorities, how we've treated women, how we've literally treated anyone who isn't the richest of the rich. And we've grown up in a society that's very much twisted our mentalities. And I'm not just saying like, oh, women have to be beautiful and women have to be homemakers and women have to be mothers. No, it's so much more than that. It's always a demonization of people's choices, right? If a woman wants to be a homemaker, she's an enemy to a feminist, right? If a woman wants to have a job and pursue her career and doesn't want children, then she's not helping grow society. She's not doing her motherly duties. But if a woman wants both, society makes it nigh impossible. Storm and I want to grow our family, but even in Washington State only covers 5 days worth of pay after having a child. And this is a state that prides itself on, being very liberal, on having a lot of freedoms for people. So to hear that, we don't promote taking care of the family. We just say, you get 5 days paid, then you better be back at work, or you better find a way of having income. Oh, might as well pay for some private insurance too on top of that. But you know what? Your private insurance doesn't cover all of that because it was your choice to get pregnant. So you might as well get like Aflac on top of that because that's going to pay for 60% of the income you would have had. Versus a country like, and I'm not saying every country is perfect, but like Ukraine, where every woman gets 3 years paid to be with their children because they believe that those first 3 years of life are vital to the growth of a child. And they are. And to assume that a woman would even be mentally and physically prepared to go back to work after 5 days, whether or not she had a C-section, whether or not she had natural birth, whether or not the birth was traumatic or she has postpartum or not, it's not the basis of a healthy society. It's not. It's not a society that wraps around you and wants to support you. And there are so many things further than that in general that American society has twisted, yet we're considered the American dream. Okay, we'll tell that to all of the homeless people in Seattle who are addicted and never receive help. I worked in a mental health hospital for 2 years, and we were not a long-term facility, nor were we actually a good facility, because any person who came in to our hospital, sure, they got care around the clock for however long they stayed, which could be anywhere between 3 days and sometimes 2 months, sometimes more. But the people there were cranky and rude and non-understanding of the fact that you were literally in your darkest mindset. But then on top of that, you were grouped with people like you who continued to encourage you to do some of the craziest strange things and cheek your drugs, taught you how to hurt yourself. Like, it was this cyclical system where it was like you go into the hospital to get help, but really you just learn how to hurt yourself more and are encouraged by other people, so that by the time you can show that you're ready to get out, you're even worse than where you were when you went in. And inpatient care or outpatient care is voluntarily, so no one's holding you to that, and it wasn't beneficial. And it's not anywhere. And not that I'm saying that mental health care is worse than it used to be, because it used to be much, much worse than that. But we are not living in a society that values the growth, independence, autonomy, tolerance, diversity of people. And every time I learn something new about American history, because they don't teach us comprehensive American history in school. They really, really don't. And I want to press that out there, that sure, you learn some things, the tips of the iceberg, and sometimes, your teachers are not wanting to traumatize you, so they're not, going to give you the nitty-gritty about what happened in every single war, but they do not give you a comprehensive education around American history. And every time I learn something about American history, I hate this country more and more. And it sucks. It sucks that the place that's supposed to be the American dream, the place that gets all the immigration, the place where we're supposed to have the most freedoms, the place where, hey, if you don't like the rules in one state, you can move to another one where you do. It's not good. It's not good at all. In fact, I think we just learned after the last school shooting that police don't actually have a duty to serve and protect us. And that's why they were allowed to literally not go into a building of children being killed. So for me, American society is like an incubus that just sucks the life out of you. And every other country starts looking better and better and better. We wonder why our mental health is so bad. And we wonder why disabilities are growing constantly. Like, we don't have a society that actually promotes being healthy, being happy, having autonomy over your own body. None of it. So this story came about to me, and I think it's really beautiful because it's a place where I wish I was. So though I love Wonder Woman and I loved the movie and it really impacted me, I did not want to create an SI. I did not want to create any sort of a fan fiction off of the Wonder Woman series, because I would love, when I make my own writing, to be able to produce it in a more like business style, and I don't want to have to go backward in time and change names and change this and that because it's too close to someone else's copyrighted work. And I think that's something to be aware of, because a lot of our fan fiction writers make absolutely gorgeous content, but it's using someone else's world and name and whatnot. And if you don't desire to go back and change all that, but you do want to make money off of it, you can't now. So something to always keep in mind. And hello, Beat, I see you. Anyway, so I have this story called Escaping Control, and it centers around a character named Gale who becomes a second-born Amazon. And if you don't know about the island of Themyscira, it's basically Paradise Island. It is the island that the Amazons branched off onto in Greek mythology because they were done with Ares shenanigans. They decided that, you know, they are daughters of Ares. They are all about fighting his wars and, you know, basically like his personal little female army, and all the Amazons were built to fight, and it sucks. Because it's just this world of war that he's created, and these poor women are having to be tools in it. So in Greek mythology, they literally cut a piece of the like land off and become an island of only women. I believe men can visit when procreation is necessary, but mostly it's just women. And this idea of a paradise island where femininity was strong, where it was looked at as a huge benefit. And when I mean femininity, I don't necessarily just mean women. I mean that feminine as a value was looked highly upon, because I think people look on it kind of like a weakness. And I've actually gotten to hear someone tell us that women are weak and women have smaller brains from a woman who was very brainwashed religiously. So I wanted to take that and make it strength. And I think that's something that I loved about the Wonder Woman movie in general, is that when you saw Themyscira, when you saw that island, that's what you saw, warrior women, but not just women who were fighting. They were taking care of people. They were not surviving, they were thriving. They were innovating, and they were happy, and life was good. So I wanted to take Paradise Island, but find a way to loop it into the problems that we're having and how they, I wouldn't say are so much better, but how they deal with it, because they get to live on this paradise island for thousands of years while the rest of society is crumbling. And how do they deal with it? So I have created this amazing idea. It didn't come to me in a dream. I will say that. I get a lot of my ideas from dreams. This more came from my daydreaming of a world I'd rather be in. How do we deal with life after death, after so much trauma and poison and toxicity in our society, whether it's pollution, whether it's minorities being discriminated against and killed, or businesses just trying to topple society, make little pawn soldier factory workers, you know? How do we deal with that after death? So I have this idea that there are second-born Amazons. And basically what it is Themyscira has been protected by a group of patrons. And these patrons are hand-picked Greek goddesses who have chosen to contribute to the island itself. So there's Aphrodite, and there's Demeter, and there's Athena, Hebe, I believe Artemis, and I think that's all of them. There might be one more, I have to remember. And they've all somehow contributed to protecting this island. So as these second-borns happen, what basically happens is a patron will notice a female of great ability or mindset or something that they need on Themyscira that they do not have because they've been so cut off from society. And when the patron notices this female, they will kind of follow them throughout their story, and when they do inevitably die, they are given the chance to become a second born and basically wake up on the beaches of Themyscira in an Amazon body that is still them. It is just taller, stronger, whatever, right? And some of the patrons also give out their gifts. So Hebe, for example, being the like child goddess, is very spry, very youthful. She's given some teleportation abilities to some of the followers that she has. And when you land on Themyscira as a secondborn, you go through an entire process. The Amazonians welcome you. They talk to you about the island. They give you a mentor to start your training. And then you're also put in front of the patron goddess statues, and you find out who you're connected to, who brought you to this island and gave you a second chance at life. And again, when I mean second chance at life, you're not going anywhere. Themyscira is completely isolated. It's Paradise Island. Nothing is bad. It's literal heaven on earth that you get to be and contribute to and continue growing you as a person, right? So there's a lot of really beautiful stories I've come up with of how some of these women have come to the island, why they're there, and what happened when they were there. And I'm actually so proud of some of those stories, and I hope that I get to spoil them because some of them are in these 9 chapters, really kind of highlighting the treatment of women in their lifetime and why it was that they were chosen to become a secondborn. But there's a bigger plot to it. That is side story stuff. That is character development for our side characters. We have a main character named Gale. And Gale is a secondborn who showed up on the island, and I have her about a month or so into being on the island in chapter 1. And she can't figure out who her patron is. She's not connecting with anyone. She has no special talents. She doesn't know why she died. Like, all of these women have these stories of their life and why they died. And she remembers her life, but she has no recollection of her death. And she's also fairly young. She remembers being fairly young. She does not remember being older. So, in my character development, which part of exposing my story was also to show you how I use these tools as I go. So, Gail, she's about 32 years old, and she lives in Current Day, America. She's middle class. She really doesn't have any family diagnoses. She doesn't really have any trauma. She's more of a freeze type of a person. She was a typical cubicle business worker in a place like Seattle where life was literally just work, sleep, work, sleep, work, sleep. It was never exciting. It was never more than. It was never promoted to her that she could have additional life out there, because in order to pay your bills, you have to work. And then in order to keep a good job, you have to show your dedication to a company and work your way up, whether you're an apprentice moving up or an intern moving up in the world. And then if you're a woman who's succeeding too much, then you're seen as potentially doing things outside of your job that are getting you that position. So she has to kind of stay where she is and live that life. It's very mundane, very boring. And again, she can't remember why she died. There's some complications because Queen Hippolyta, who is in Greek mythology, she is the queen of the Amazons. She's understanding that Gale doesn't connect, and she respects that, but she's also like, why don't you connect? Because one of these patrons brought you here for a reason. You are supposed to teach us something through your experiences in life. And that's something that I really wanted to be a theme, is women teaching women through history, right? Is we've experienced this and this is what we've learned. We're bringing that knowledge to you. I think that it's a really beautiful environment when we as humans use our experiences to teach the new generations, or even to teach older generations the new things that we've been learning. And that's, again, like a cyclical system where we're just learning and growing together because we respect where each other came from and our differences and diversities. So Gail's having a bit of trouble in her new society. She thinks it's beautiful. She thinks it's wonderful. This is super cool. But again, doesn't know why she's dead. doesn't know why she's not connecting with a patron. She's fairly frustrated by this fact, because she feels like, okay, I'm here, I should be able to contribute, but I'm not. She also is starting to hear the gorgeous stories from other women and why they are there, and she's like, I don't have any of these stories. I haven't done anything with my life. And Gail really embodies the current day American female. The reason being is, again, we get so caught up in the systems and having to pay our bills. So we pull out 2 or 3 jobs to pay the bills that are never paid off, right? They are consistently building interest, or you need them in order to live, and your basic needs are hardly taken care of because you have to work. And if you have to work to pay your bills, then you don't really have time to do much else, right? So living in this system that does not promote growth and change and happiness, that is her embodiment, right? So she is very confused. Now, the one thing I will say about my writing, because I have 9 chapters, I would love to go through and read them. Storm is right here, and he's actually writing the adjacent story. So I came up with this story, and I showed it to him and let him kind of give me some information on what he thought. And now he wants to make an adjacent story about the background happenings of what is going on with Gale and this island. On the story map, it gets a little intense. I haven't worked my way completely up, but basically Ares is coming back for his warriors. He has, Beat says hi, he has created a world this way for a reason. Ares has contributed to greed and war and anger and trauma and just this intense amount of anger and willingness to manipulate other people for what he wants. And so he's been doing this once again to take his rightful position away from Zeus, because he's like, Zeus isn't doing everything that he could be doing. He could be doing more. Now, the cool thing about this is written from Gale's perspective. It's not going to be written from Ares. It's not going to be third person where you're seeing what's happening in the background. You don't get all of that information. You simply get the reactions, right? So Gale's coming into this as Ares is making plans to take back his warriors. He is ready to basically set off a giant war on Earth and interfere with Zeus's ability to run the pantheon. And the way that I've created this system is we're on a planar existence. So you have the mundane, non-magical, earthly world that Gale lives on, and that the Amazons, their island, lives on, right? They don't really have access to magic aside from through their patrons, and they never really had magic to begin with in the first place. So their island of Themyscira being the most dense is the reason why they do get any abilities at all. But other than that, the rest of the earth has no magic. So there's another plane on top of that, which would be where Mount Olympus and the rest of the, I guess, Greek mythos live. So whether you're a nymph or a satyr or a god, something like that, right? And they've chosen to distance themselves from the humans just because how destructive they've become, which is something that Ares has very much taken advantage of. So that's our biggest climax, is that Ares is back. He wants to take his warriors, and what his intention to do is the humans have made horrendous weapons, nuclear weapons, energy-based weapons, these weapons that back in ancient Greece would have never been possible, ever. Any war that Ares wanted to fight against Zeus wouldn't have been possible, not at all. But now he has the greed and the excitement and the destruction of the human race that they've cultivated over this time. And he wants to infuse any godlike abilities he can to nuclear god-killing weapons and just demolish Mount Olympus and take what's rightfully his, right? So his last step in this plan is to take the Amazons with him being that they're still on Earth, he very much wants access to them, but they are protected by patrons. And these patrons have all agreed the Amazons do not belong to Ares, even though they are canonically his daughters. They're living a completely different and separate life, and they want nothing to do with him. They've made that very clear, and they want autonomy. But he doesn't. He doesn't want to give them autonomy. And this is where I really wanted to step into the role of someone observing abuse and trauma in action. So Gale is going to be observing how Ares is basically infecting Themyscira. And in chapter 9, it starts happening where basically he weasels his way onto the island even though he's not supposed to have access. Of course, gaslighting and manipulating the people who help him get there. And saying, you know, oh my gosh, how awesome. My daughters are here. You're going to help me. We're going to be the strong, brave conquerors. It's going to be great. Just flowering up this whole plan that he has. And Queen Hippolyta is going to be like, take the high road. Like, go. Goodbye. We don't want anything to do with your plans. And this is going to upset him, but in the way that Ares does, where he's conniving and snide and still thinks he is so much better than everyone else and that he's untouchable. And then Gale is going to start seeing mimics of what she experienced on the normal earthly plane happening on Themyscira, but in ways that are very noticeable to her, right? So I won't say that gaslighting and manipulation didn't exist in ancient Greece, but it's going to happen to such a degree that we're seeing here in current day American society, not even just American society, but all over the world, where we have people who are con artists and people who manipulate what they say in order to have, you know, a different agenda. And she's going to start seeing parallels of the results of that manipulation and fear-mongering happening on Themyscira and start pointing it out and saying, I'm seeing this happen. This is how you can deal with it, right? Or I've seen this happen at my last job. My boss tried to do this too. It's not okay, right? Because at this point, the women have lived without trauma and they've healed and they're living in such a beautiful society. But now they're being attacked in a very different way because it's not direct. Ares has a couple sons, I believe, Fear and Terror, or Fear and Terror. Something like that. And so he's going to use them to mentally manipulate the women through fear-mongering, through gaslighting, through imposter syndrome, basically just making the women discredit themselves and not value and trust themselves, which goes back to that original theme in Wonder Woman that I loved so much, which was where they really valued themselves. So, let's see. I think you're one of the viewers on here, but I would love to start going through chapter 1. It's rough, I'm not gonna lie. I've edited it a few times. Storm has gone through to help edit it a few times, but again, because I didn't pre-plan anything, there's probably continuity problems, there's probably tonal issues. I think chapter 2 is what really highlights to me, and I would love to get into that. The stories of the women also really important, but the goal of these kind of workshops is that I'm giving myself about 5 workshops to try and go through all 9 chapters and get a better basis for this story and organization for this story so that I can continue running with it and releasing the chapters as I go. So, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read it. I have not read chapter 1 in a hot moment. So, hopefully there's a little bit of grace there. And if you get bored, my chapters are about 3,000 words each. I like short chapters. My ADHD brain doesn't do long things. So, we'll go through. Escaping Control, chapter 1. Does it still feel strange for you here? A calm and assertive voice questioned. Crystalline shimmers collided inside rolling waves on the water's surface. The wild blue scene crashed onto banks of sand and large stones. With such beautiful surroundings, Gail's mind easily drifted into daydreams and endless trains of thought. Gail, are you here with me? Tatia's voice broke Gail's trance as her eyes scanned over the ocean to meet the Amazon's deep and serious gaze back at her. The beaches here are so clear, as if untouched by pollution, protected from human influence. That is the nature of the island. Themyscira remains unharmed as it travels through time and location. Under Hippolyta's ruling, the Amazons stay safe. The sun's shine glinted off Tatia's dewy complexion. We're gonna get some landscaping work, by the way, so if it gets too loud, let me know. Her angular features reflecting golden hues complementing her darker skin tone. She turned to the sea, its waves pushing and pulling at the shore it breached. Valor radiated from Tatia's grounded stance and flexed posture. One of my goals is I'm very, very bad at exposition. In fact, I need to map the island because I think I've even gotten confused as to where things are on this island and definitely need some help with my exposition, but I also love using floral language, so we'll go with it. Gail looked to the ground where Tatia's feet were planted, bending the soft, untamed grass to the shape of her combat boots. Ever since her arrival on Themyscira, she noticed how the Amazons melded into the island's natural features. Their feet connected strongly with the earth below them, grounded and unmoving, their breathing heaving at the pace of the waves that crashed upon the island. Even the building structures that caressed hillsides and blended in with the foundation built upon. See, here we go. Here's an edit. The foundation they were built upon seemed a part of the island in nature. Never before had Gail seen such intimate feminine strength and community bonds encouraged in each member of the Amazon nation. This is one of those moments where I question if I am telling too much and not showing enough. Though this is part of the exposition, which is the showy part, it's just very forward with this is a very feminine story, and I want to make sure that I'm still leaving something to be desired here. So we'll get past that. In fact, I think I will make a note here. If it'll let me. Where's my suggestion box? Oh, there we go. Too showy question mark. We'll just leave that for a note later. Gail cleared her throat and tried to match Tatia's stare, clearly feeling jostled out of her thoughts. Yes. Yes, what? Yes, it still feels strange here for me. Or, for me here. Maybe that would be more. Yes, it still feels strange here. Strange for me here. Strange here for me. I'll question that one in a bit. Gail hoped her directness would be met with understanding, compassion even. Surely other women who were lucky enough to be brought to Paradise Island were not without some hesitation at first. The sheer autonomy and sense of purpose expressed in the daily life of the Amazons felt intimidating. It will pass. Others assimilated quickly, though I hear time moves differently for those accustomed to Earth's day cycle. It's not just time, it's the freedom. Freedom I never thought to grasp at before. It's overwhelming to learn all the ways I oppressed myself in a society fueled by lies and corporate greed. The very thought made her cheeks flush from bewilderment. How did she live a life so strong-armed by the top few who controlled everything from politics to women's underwear? Again, this is a moment where I think it's a little too forward with that, like, feminist theme. This is a moment where I almost wonder if I really need to reel it back. Let's go through morning routine. You'll be considered a guest here for only a short period before you're expected to act as a unit with the others. If you were chosen to expand our people by the goddesses, you must possess something valuable. I must. Gail let out with a short humph sound. A genuine fear of Gail's was the idea that she wouldn't find herself useful to the Amazons or their captivating way of life. I've never met a newly emancipated, and this is where continuity is a problem. I started calling them newly emancipated, but then I started going with second-born. So I need... what just happened? I need to get rid of that. Go away. Editing mode. I need to get rid of emancipated and instead say second-born. Continuity matters. I've never met a second-born who cannot transverse to Amazon status. The goddesses are particular with their choices. They would never send us someone who is not an asset to the Themyscira. We can help you, but you'll be challenged to face the warrior behind the barriers. Now you must prepare for morning gathering. Turning to the upward trail paved with stones, Tatia started her trek to the mess hall. Gale closed her eyes and took in a deep breath, held in the air until her lungs felt full, then pushed it all out before following her mentor up the path. So with chapter 1, you can see that I'm not starting from the moment Gale gets there. I'm not starting from her own thoughts and feelings. It's more of a, we are in this already, and that was purposeful. I really wanted it to be like that. Gale made her way through the corridors of the mess hall, glancing back and forth at the marvelous statue. Thank you, Vita. Marvelous marble statues standing guard with weapons in hand. She had been here for a few weeks already, but the depiction of garments lazily draped on the warrior women still make... Come on. Come here. I know. Sorry. I have to make room for the kitten. He's not much of a kitten, but he is. He's only a year old. Hi, honey.
He's just a baby.
He is just a baby. Okay. I'm glad that you can make yourself comfortable, honey. Sorry. She had been here for a few weeks already, but the depiction of garments lazily draped on the warrior woman still made her blush as she felt the need to cover her own body more modestly in response. Tatia had told her that the Amazons worshipped a woman's body for its strength and beauty, but did they need a 12-foot visual reminder in every hall? Before attending... Can I help you? Thanks. Before attending any gatherings, Gale had been instructed to wash up in her room. For the time being, she was gifted a simple room located in the dorms of the mess hall until she became established within the community. Most Amazons lived amongst each other in beautiful housing pods made of clay and glass. Pods that were... You are so cute. Pods that were made up of a communal living area and separate rooms for each Amazon. Yeah, he's just a little baby. Some women chose to add on to their personal rooms if they required more space, but most were too busy with their trainings or daily responsibilities to worry about their living quarters. Aside from the living pods, the buildings in Themyscira highly resembled ancient Greek architecture, complete with white columns, great valued ceilings, and complex moldings. These buildings served many purposes, but the one Gale focused on most was their storytelling ability. Within the molding, she could see depictions of great battles, beautiful warriors, and victory. She had never felt so moved by stone before experiencing Greek architecture. When she made it back to her room and locked herself in, she sucked in a quick breath. Locked herself in... I don't like how many times I said in there. When she made it back to her room and locked herself in, she sucked in a quick breath. I'm just going to get rid of that in. Culture shock had been overwhelming her, but to be assimilating into her new normal felt like someone had weighed her down with a bag of gravel. She leaned against the door and placed one hand to her chest. The rapid thumping of her heart pulsed in her palm. Thank you. Gale closed her eyes and focused on calming her mind. She still remembered feeling water around her feet and warm sands pressed into the side of her face. The Amazon scout found her laying on the beach covered in ocean debris and dried salt. Processing her new environment was difficult from day one. Is Amazonia? An Amazon. See, this is why we edit. An Amazon medic had explained Gale's new reality in explicit detail when she awoke. In layman's terms, she was dead to her previous reality. This was not kept secret from any of the emancipated. This is where we need to go second born. to avoid emotional stunting during the training process. The person she was before caught the eyes of one of the patron goddesses protecting Themyscira, allowing her entry and delivery into feminine paradise. Those who knew her before would mourn her passing, her earthly body left in her last reality. When she arrived, she had been gifted a physical manifestation of her spiritual womanhood. Gale was like a clumsy fawn, getting to know her new limbs and vertical bonus. As it was with most of the Amazon women, Gale had grown to at least 6 feet, her shoulders broadened, and her original earthly features had been emphasized. Her once pale face now glittered with bronze-like freckles. Moving away from the door and choosing to finally freshen up, Gale admired her changes in the bathroom mirror, looking from her blushed cheeks to her feminine jawline, which had become much more angular and slim. The island's wind had thrown about her hair, which had become difficult to tame. What was once damaged thin hair had now bulked in texture and volume. Copper locks weighed heavily on her head and down her back. She had cut it in the first weeks, but it grew back as if protesting her attempts to manage the mane. Once she had successfully tied a ribbon around the copper coils, she washed her face and hands in a small basin filled with water and scented oils. Gone were the days of antibacterial soap and sprays. Amazons had a natural immunity to most germs that her original body would normally succumb to. Gale, on the end of her bed, fumbling with the many leather straps attached to her combat... Gale sat on her bed, my bad. Sometimes she really felt like she had time traveled to ancient Greece. The fashion and massive structures dated the Amazon women, but there was something still modern and functional about her surroundings. Perhaps other second-born, not emancipated. I'm wondering if I should capitalize second-born, since it's the title. What do you think? Do you think I should be capitalizing second-born since it's a title?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go through and do that later. Perhaps other second-born women had influenced the culture ever so slightly. Knuckles rapped at Gale's bedroom door, causing her to jump. Yes, I'll be out soon. One last drop. If I could just stay present, maybe I would be on time more often. An enthusiastic voice chirped from outside the door. Good morning, Gale. Lydia and I are on our way to the morning meal. Want us to wait for you? Yes, please. I'm just about ready. Gale stood to open the door, but the sudden change in height caused her to lose balance and plop back onto the bed. Slow. Just go slow. With more caution, Gale stood up and approached the door. As it swung open, Detrana and Lydia became visible to Gale. By the way, I love the name Detrana. I don't even know how I came up with that one. Not sleeping in, I hope. That should probably be a comma, huh? Yep. Mentors tend to find the mornings a great time for lectures. Wouldn't want to miss those. Detrana flashed a smile as the sarcasm escaped her voice. How could Tatia ever waste an opportunity like that? This morning's lecture was about the goddess's protections and the island's natural defenses. I think she believes I still feel unsafe here, but how could anyone feel that way on Paradise Island? Gale motioned to the window in her room that displayed green hills and blue skies. From the window she could hear laughter, prayer, and all the sounds of nature untouched. I spelled defenses incorrectly, and that needs a comma, or a apostrophe. See, look at this wonderful editing skills. Do you want to maybe sit up a little bit more? Thanks. There we go. Okay. Don't pay too much mind to Tatia. Her last second-born, not newly emancipated. This is the kind of stuff I need. Okay. Space. Her last second-born was a quick learner and became a general quickly. Some women arrived ready for action while some lacked the initiative. Lydia's stoic stare pierced into Gale. She knew Lydia didn't mean to lessen her emotional transition, but she wasn't wrong. Gale had left behind a life that felt like it was stagnant, always waiting on an email, paperwork, a phone call. Her internal motivation had reached beyond Her internal motivation to reach beyond her current abilities had been severely lacking. She wondered if she was ever missed or talked about. The initial shock of her passing would affect company production at first, but they would replace her easily. As for her family and friends, they had been displaced for so long. Perhaps notice of her passing was just another thing her mother could manipulate to gain attention and sympathy. So, showing that she never really had a positive relationship with her mother. She's doing that abnormal staring thing. Where does she go? Lydia's voice drew Gail back in like an anchor as she shook her head clear and straightened her posture. Goodbye. Sorry, I get so lost in thought. I'm ready to go. If Gail couldn't focus on one conversation, how was she going to focus on sparring as her new mentor swung weapons past her head? Maybe if she was lucky, she would find purpose in a less dangerous placement within the island. I'd like to try eating something new this morning. I've engorged myself with Eileen fruit every morning. I might be even made purely of sugar now. Detrana let out a chuckle and responded, You know food is not necessary. Why worry about what to try? You can't live 25 years as a couch potato then suddenly stop snacking. I suspect it will take me months to unlearn that habit. Plus, food makes me happy, so what should I try next? I established here that she's 25, but I want to change that to 32. I want to give her some age, just a little bit. Because I feel like 25 is still so young to say that you've lived that kind of... It doesn't work. I think 32 is better. Lydia chimed in as they walked down the mess hall. I suggest the wild boar, especially if Tatia has you sparring more today. You might as well get some enjoyment from your morning routine. Wild boar it is. I need to drink more tea, I'm sorry. Storm and I both have COVID. I just got a positive test today, and he's had a positive test for a few days now.
Whoa.
All right. The mess hall was in a large open Parthenon. My bad. I need to remember that word because I think I changed it to pavilion in some of the other chapters, and I really need to label Parthenon versus pavilion. The mess hall was in a large open Parthenon-style building with marble columns and open spaces instead of the typical solid walls and windows most buildings provided. A large table took up most of the room from one end to the other and was covered in different breakfast dishes and treats. Many women were already sitting down, chatter and laughter filling the air as they took sips of wine from golden goblets. Towards the middle of the table, Gail could see Tatia waving her over, indicating an open spot for her to sit. It was common for mentors to spend social time with their, again, we're changing this to secondborn, but sometimes Gail wished she could sit with Detrana. Most weapons were not allowed at the gathering table, yet most Amazons brought them. It was uncommon to see an Amazon without her weapons, no matter the setting. In different corners of the Pantheon were stands and cupboards to stash away various swords, bows, javelins, and more. There should be another comma. Detrana stopped at one of the weapon stations, tucking her bow behind the stand and out of sight. She brushed her hands down her leather skirt before turning around and walking to the table to join Lydia. Gail maneuvered around the various women sitting and standing at the table until she made it to the chair Tatia had reserved for her. Okay, I want to make sure we're talking about Detrana, not Gail there. Tatia managed to find spots among other mentors and their much more seasoned secondborns. Gail was the newest to be born again, and therefore felt like a shiny new toy to most of the mentors. Many secondborns secondborn members kept their mentors for years before becoming independent enough to emulate the culture and code of a true Amazon warrior. a new second-born, tended to wash upon the shore every 50 to 100 years, depending on the goddess's wishes. Gale was the first to show up sooner than expected, an event that had caused a bit of ruckus among the members of the island. So here's where I established that the second-born women are really kind of rare in occurrence. They do show up every, 50 to 100 years, but it's closer to, 75 to 100. And she showed up much sooner than that 50-year mark, which worried them a bit. Yeah. An Amazon from across the table smiled at Gale as she settled into her chair. Gale, how was your morning with Tatya? With a quick glance to Tatya, then back at the prepositioner, Gale stuttered out. Oh, it was beautiful. We walked to the lower plateau and watched the waves crash on the shore. The island surprises me with how peaceful it feels. And what of your lesson? Surely Tatya had you do much more than watch the sea's repetitive movements. Oh my god, did I just make my mentor look bad? Of course I would mess up a simple morning conversation. Crap, say something, Gale. Oh, of course. I was just remarking at the beauty of the setting. My home before had shores and ocean views, but the pollution was so visible and off-putting. I'm thankful that Tatya showed me. We took the time to speak about how the Themyscira is protected, the legend of the goddesses, and the natural barriers the island possesses. Gale looked to her mentor for any sign of approval. Ah, yes. Without our patrons, we would cease to exist. We may be children of Ares, but without the guidance of the goddesses, we would be as mad as him and as dead as his soldiers. Or in your case, simply dead from your previous life. Tell me, have you gained your connection with any of the patrons yet? I would love to know which one sent you. The Amazon's prodding questions caused Gale to shift uncomfortably in her seat. Tatya straightened up in her chair, lowering her chin slightly to show her sister the full view of her gaze. Eritrea, that's enough. Morning meals are a time to reconnect with our sisters in arms. If we are to train a second-born properly... Oh my gosh, I didn't capitalize it. We must emulate our own teachings in life. If you have further questions for Gale, you may direct them to me. As her mentor, I take responsibility for her assimilation. The Amazon, Eritrea, took notice of Tatya's change in posture, changing her own to lean back and submit to the command. Well, hello, sir. Of course, sister. Gale, I would like for us to spend time in the temple today. Again, gotta get rid of this newly emancipated for a second-born. It's uncommon for a second-born to be without their patron for this long. Most feel a strong connection to the patron who sent them here within a week or two. So, you hear Storm? Isn't COVID great? You good, babe? Yeah, fine. Alright, awesome. Most feel a strong connection to their patron who sent them here within a week or two. Some even become oracles if they're blessed to hear their patrons speak to them. I'm sorry I've disappointed you. The last time we went, it felt like I was talking to an empty room. I wasn't given any feedback. Gale tucked her chin into the neckline of her dress and sat back in her chair, almost mimicking Eritrea. There's no need to apologize. You have no control over the goddesses and how they communicate. Please sit up. I believe our queen will be arriving soon. Gale sat up and started to pick at the slab of wild boar on her plate. As if timed, Queen Hippolyta became visible at the head of the table, clad in scholarly robes of deep blue and cream-colored fabrics, followed by her sisters from the records room, carrying scrolls and conversing. I'm going to go ahead and capitalize records room. Before sitting down, the queen raised her glass and looked around the table of women. Sisters, good morning. Before we commence, I would like to thank our mentors for their morning lessons and acknowledge our secondborns for their progress in their studies. Assimilating to the Amazon way of life is a feat only true warriors can attempt. We are proud to support those chosen by the goddesses, and we wish you all to grow strong in mind and body. Gale knew the queen had to be speaking to her, or the one other secondborn. Before her. She looked at her mentor only to lock eyes with Tatia, already staring at her, smiling proudly with her arms crossed. If only this Amazon body lacked the ability to blush. No doubt the queen has also caught on that I'm still without a patron. Gail held her breath before exhaling to say, how soon is too soon to leave a morning meal? Well, as long as you stay to hear the queen's greeting, really any time is fine. You're so eager to start your trainings? Or are you so eager? My bad. Are you so eager to start your trainings? Tatia's voice sounded nearly giddy at the thought of an early start to the day. Yeah. Actually, if we could just leave now. Maybe figure out the patron stuff? Perhaps if Gail spent more time with the patrons, everyone would leave her alone about her shortcomings as a secondborn. Boredom. Excellent. Tatia clapped her hands together enthusiastically. They both stood from their chairs and stepped down out of the Parthenon and towards the temple. If I can finally make a connection to one of the goddesses, I can stop being a big question mark to the queen and all of her gossiping bees. No doubt they made me well aware that my presence was unexpected, maybe even unwelcome. So that is kind of the tone I'm going with, is Gail is very much a space cadet, locked in her own brain, and she's just at this point really noticing the differences between where she came from and where she is. Though it's absolutely gorgeous, she's already feeling very much like a failure in this kind of new world. So that's chapter 1. Any feedback bead for chapter 1 while I pull up chapter 2?
Nice.
I should probably go back and make sure all of those are capitalized as well. Whoop. Find secondborn and replace with capital secondborn. Sweet. Okay. Well, hello, beta. What's you looking at on your phone?
All the things you sent me on Instagram.
Oh. Do you have your headphones in? Because most of them needed sound. Yeah. Yeah. I really agree with you with that. It's definitely a good one to revisit. I think that it's, again, a little too telling of the overall themes. So I kind of like clicked those parts and left a comment. I'm going to go back there and find a more graceful way of incorporating those and kind of taking away the immediate, like, just the harshness of it. It's too much, really.
Work in more subtlety.
A lot more subtlety. I think that it's necessary in order to not just overwhelm the reader with, this is a feminist story. As much as I'd love to, but it needs a lot more subtlety, especially if I'm going to reach more audience than a specific one. Mm-hmm. So definitely, and that was harder for me to see early on writing this because, like I had said kind of back on Discord, I randomly came up with this idea and just wrote like 3 chapters in one night because I was so, I don't know, just ADHD moment.
And while we've been here, I've almost finished the first chapter of the other story.
Yes. So Storm is writing an adjacent story of how there's going to be things that happen on this island that it's going to be like, how did that happen? It's happening over in his story in a completely different plane. So that's kind of cool. His is definitely going to be a more comical approach to the world.
Yes, we have much different tones.
Mm-hmm.
You're writing something that's more serious with a social commentary.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is more comical, a little bit more lighthearted. If you want an idea of just kind of like the vibe, think like Good Omens.
Yeah.
Is kind of like the shtick I'm kind of aiming for, where you can't really take it too seriously, but it's mixed in with a heist kind of idea as well. So you have this mystery aspect that's also kind of comical. That also ties into a few plot points for this story. Because mine technically happens before/during. So yeah.
I also agree with your other comment about it being kind of abrupt. That was absolutely a goal of mine, and I will have like an interlude into the world on top of chapter 1 to kind of help give a little bit of a scene and tonality, but it varies much what happened to Gale, and that's why chapter 2 is going to actually dive into what is going on a bit more, because like I said, it's not just happening to Gale, it's happening to the whole island. They didn't expect her to be there. They did not expect to have someone this early, and they did not expect to have someone complicated, and suddenly they do. So it's definitely more explained as we go through, and I wanted to make sure not to give all that information up front. But yes, I will have kind of an interlude in the beginning to express what's happening. Maybe like not like a, what am I thinking of? I always think of epilogue, but I know it's not epilogue.
Prologue?
A prologue, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, COVID brain. Okay, so, hello, Mr. Trek. Chapter 2. Deep breathing is key to grounding your mind and body in one solid state of being. The life of this island is one of the goddesses The life of this island is one with the goddesses who protect it. You were given life by one of those goddesses, and therefore they live within you. Aphrodite, our voice of law and protector from distraction. Athena, our voice of wisdom in the blood red of war. Hebe, goddess of energetic youth and innovative imagination. Demeter, goddess of harvest and the fertility of the earth. And lastly, Artemis, huntress and protector of women. Each patron is here to offer us gifts of their compassion, strength, and wisdom. Tati elaborated as she circled Gale. When you connect with one, the two of you will enter a life contract, your new life and power for undying devotion to her cause. Literally, Gale huffed jokingly. She never asked for a mortal life, and now she owes it to an unseen patron. On top of feeling like a failure for not connecting to the goddesses, she was an unusual variable for the Amazons, which had already put her at risk for scrutiny that she couldn't defend. Gale, without a connection to your patron, there are many unanswered questions about your purpose here. My personal conflict with this is that I do believe you are trying. It is as if the goddesses are unable to connect with you. There is a common game the Amazons play where we guess the newly emancipated, which needs to go to secondborn. Where we guess who the secondborn belongs to. We have found ways to easily identify it before the connection is established just based on feeling alone, but you feel isolated. Tatia looked up at the temple's elaborate marble ceilings. Gale could see her eyes searching the carved moldings. The temple's carvings depicted beauty, victory, methods of devotion, and more. Battle and bloodshed had deliberately not been a part of the design here. Tatia, what happens if I can't connect? Gale turned to look at Tatia from the floor of the temple, her knees sore from kneeling before the large statues of the goddesses. Tatia shifted her gaze from the ceiling to Gale's tired eyes. They had been at this for a few hours now, and they both had started to feel hopeless. Gale, I will not quit on you, but understand this. If you choose to give up, if you take this gift for granted, I will not be able to defend you against the others who question your situation. 20 years. Gale, we have never had a secondborn breach our shores only 20 years apart from the last. You know what? I'm just going to go through and fix that now, because that's going to kill me. Newly emancipated. Oh, is there no more newly emancipated on there? What about Yeah.
Yeah, you get that.
We're just going to move on to secondborn. So that's just going to kill me having to replace all of those. Cool.
Boom.
Done.
Nice.
Okay. Where was I? There is speculation amongst the council members. Tatya drifted into thought, questioning if she should divulge more information of her inner thoughts within the council. Speculation? Of what nature? Gail's brow furrowed as she stared at her mentor's glassy gaze. Amazons do not keep secrets from each other. It's not honorable, which makes my decision difficult. You are not yet an Amazon, but you must have been chosen by one of our patrons. How could you breach our protection if not given an invitation by one of the goddesses? You expect me to know? I don't even know how I died. Each second-born I have met on this island was some extraordinary woman in her first life. Doctors, inventors, soldiers. What I was? What was I? What was I? I was a nothing, a waste of life. I was the weakest, subservient, talentless life form. Gail stood slowly brushing... What?
I'm gonna go lay down.
Okay. Yeah. Gail stood slowly, brushing off her knees and walking towards the exit of the temple. Gail, please, you just need more time. If your goddesses are so perfect, why did they make such a big mistake? Gail didn't wait for her answer. She didn't want the answer. Speculation? What could they speculate about her? They knew nothing of her. In fact, Gail knew nothing of herself. This is a situation where, I'm kind of feeling like it's a high bit too aggressive, which I'm going to go throw a comment in. Because again, it's a little on the telling and not showing part, so possibly about that. Okay. I just read your comment, sorry. The island was only so large. Gail had yet to find a private spot for herself, but now she was determined to find peace and quiet. An island full of female warriors did not need to see her cry just to point and laugh. Did they have feelings like she did? Maybe she really wasn't meant to be an Amazon if she was the only one to be seen crying. Again, this is where she still has a lot of internalized misogyny, where she believes that, like, oh, weakness comes from emotion. Being emotional is a weakness. So that was purposeful. She walked down to the lower plateaus of the island where she could see the beaches in full view. Excuse you, sir. Can you not? Thank you. She wanted to find the exact spot where they found her. Weeks had gone by since she first washed up there, but what if there could still be something, a clue to why she was chosen? All second-borns arrived naked and cleared of all past belongings, but if she was a special case, could there be something she brought with her? Gail started down the beach as a voice called out from out of the window from the top of a tall wooden patrol tower. As she made her way to the sand, the Amazon climbed down from the tower ladder to meet her. They both continued to make strides in the sand toward one another. This Amazon had bronzed skin and long, lean legs. She wore a swim appropriate outfit. Maybe I should hyphenate that. A swim appropriate outfit with a horn attached to her hip, used to alert others of dangers or a need of assistance. Her smile caused her almond eyes to squint in the sun. Raising a hand to her eyes, she paused to identify Gail. With a sudden jump of excitement, the Amazon waved Gail to hurry closer. You good? Thanks, bud. Letting out an exacerbated puff, Gail gave in and quickened her pace. Gail! Oh, it's so good to finally meet you. I am Atanis, the original scout who found you. She grabbed Gail's hand and shook it eagerly. Wait, you found me? You wouldn't remember where, would you? That was convenient, though I'm sure jobs don't change often around here. There's not many beaches, so being a scout is kind of there's like 3 of them. Atanis let go of Gail's hand and pinched her chin and thought, you know, I believe it was not far from here. If you don't mind the walk, I can gladly escort you. Escort you there. How about I just get her there? Escort you. Yes, please. I would really appreciate the help. No worries. I know what it's like coming from your world. I was a second-born before earning my Amazon status. I was a child during the time of the Korean War. Atanis's voice drifted away from her. I'm so sorry. Is that what brought you here? It must have been terrifying. Gail looked down at the sand as she trudged on after Atanis. Oh, goodness no. I lived out the war. In fact, a group of American soldiers found me alone in my hut after my family had fallen victim to our own country's treachery. I was able to show the Americans how to shelter in the forested area next to my hut. They gave me food and protected me. A few men did die from that battalion before the war ended, but I was able to go back to America with them. Eventually, I earned my citizenship and a career as a Korean American translator for generals and other government officials. My efforts led to compromises and peace between many countries. War is such a vile way to solve problems. I am very thankful to Athena for this blessing. A second life is something I would never have imagined was possible. Atanis had a smile stretching across her face. Dimples pressed into her cheeks and small wrinkles at the edges of her eyes became more expressed. What a beautiful and treacherous life you led. Only enforcing my own uselessness. Again, that might be a little too aggressive there, so I will make note of that. Here we are. Atanis bounced gleefully. I remember it better now. You showed up late in the night. I found you covered in seaweed and kelp. Most women I've found come to within a few hours, but you took days to become fully functional. I remember my own emancipation. We're going to change emancipation to second birth, I guess, since they're second born. My own second birth. I remember feeling the sand and worrying about a missed appointment. Oh goodness, what a long time ago that was. Why do you think it took me longer than others? I still don't have a way to confirm, but I'm guessing that your transition was not so easy. Most second-borns know how they passed. They feel a connection to their patron because at one point she carried you here to us. But, well, I wonder if your patron couldn't carry you. I don't know why she wouldn't, but you seem to be in distress, not peaceful like the others. Distressed? Gail got down on her knees and began sifting around in the sand. What are you looking for, Gail? I don't know. A clue? Gail, you arrived bare like everyone else. You don't get to keep anything from the past. Atanis, you have been very helpful. I think I will be okay on my own now. Gail looked up at Atanis' face, but the sun shone brightly into her eyes, forcing her to look back down. Okay, Gail, if you need anything, you know where my post is. Atanis smiled, calmed as she gave Gail one last look, then turned around to leave. Gail turned her attention back to the beach in front of her. She had no idea if there would be anything to find, but if there was, maybe it would give her answers she so desperately needed. So here's one of the first secondborns that I've explained, which is Atanis. She, like I said in there, she was she was alive during the Korean War. The reason why she gained her, ability to become a secondborn was through Athena, because Athena is all about knowledge and war, and she was a child of war who was able to use her knowledge, so her ability to translate and communicate with people in order to help solve wars, stall wars, and create treaties between different countries. So that's where her heroism comes from, it comes from her ability to communicate. She's a very happy person, very peppy. Anything. Find anything. There has to be something here. Evening set in. The sun threatened to slip beyond the horizon. Already on her knees, Gail was elbow deep in sand, sweeping her arm back and forth like a makeshift broom. As she got closer to the water's edge, the terrain became cold and thick, too arduous to sweep away. She stopped, instead choosing to dig her fingers into the beach and pull away handfuls of wet sand. The wet grains quickly built up underneath her fingernails and in the webs of her fingers. Her hands became raw with micro-abrasions from the friction. When Gail failed to find anything, she dug through the reeking piles of kelp and seaweed that had dried up in the sun after the tide had left them behind. She picked away at the stiff greenery, lifting sheets of seaweed up and out of the way. Salt dust stuck to her hands, causing a stinging sensation to build and irritate her skin until her hands were pink and shaky. There's nothing. Why is there nothing? She reached her hands behind her head, laced her fingers together, and curled up on the beach. Tears began flowing down her cheeks as she tried to control her breathing. What kind of afterlife was this? Even if heaven and hell didn't exist after death, the other option would allow her to just disappear, cease to think or feel. Instead, she was stuck on Paradise Island, forced to disappoint the very women who were famously built to be strong and intelligent, to exist forever out of the control of a man-made world. Gail saw it in the Amazons. She saw true freedom from oppression, women who supported each other with their talents, who came together without pain in the world. Everything they could ever want was here for them. Without want, there was no crime, no need to hurt others out of spite. A life without trauma, a life without hunger. No one was conveniently privileged over others. No one was left wanting. Yet, Gail was the outsider who could look in, left wanting. She closed her eyes, tears mixed with snot in a pool below her face in the sand. She couldn't stop the flow from her face. Weeks of frustration and failure finally manifested, leaving her body red and leaking. Gail's chest heaved in shallow breaths that shook her oversized body. Maybe I could just stay here. Let the tide come in and take me away again. I could just remain a mystery to the island that everyone forgets. Just drift away. So, I know it's a little dark. Maybe I should put some forewarnings out there. There's a reason why Gail thinks this way. More than just society. So, I do want to put that out there that her mentality is already slightly unhealthy. And so, having this second chance to be a better person and it not working is overly frustrating, especially after like a month of time of this. Okay. My COVID-y symptoms are acting up right now. I'm sorry. Okay. She's over there. Atanis's voice sounded far away from Gail. The sound of sand crunching under feet started bringing Gail back to reality. What was she doing out here? Tatia's voice rang out after Atanis. She was looking for something. I don't know why. I told her no one comes here with anything. But you left her alone? She was clearly emotional, Atanis. It's part of your position to recognize these things. Gail felt hands grab at her shoulder. I'm sorry, Gail. I never meant to hurt you. We don't have to talk about it now, but please, let's go back to your dorm. We can get you cleaned up and comfortable. Tatia attempted to pull at Gail's arm. Gail resisted, shaking off Tatia's grip. No, just go away. I'm not like you. That's not true, Gail. Please, let's talk somewhere else. The tide is coming in. You've clearly been out here too long. Can't you feel the water at your feet? Tatia's voice sounded desperate and strained. No, I just want to leave. Gail moved to her knees from the fetal position and pounded her fists forward into the sand. I don't belong here. Tatia shifted away from Gail's physical outburst, staring at her in silence. Gail didn't move, her fists still planted in the beach, her chest expanding and falling in the deep and rapid rhythm. I do want to point something out. When Storm originally was reading this, he had said that it kind of sounded like a tantrum, pounding her fists forward into the sand. And I want to make it very clear that if this were a man pounding his fists into the sand, I don't think anyone would see it as a tantrum. But because it's a woman, it's seen that way. And I want to remind you that she has the muscular stature of an Amazon. Pounding her fists into the sand is not a tantrum. It is an expression of anger and frustration, and it's completely healthy. And so I'm glad that he had pointed that out, because I was able to also point out how that was a biased way of thinking. Because if this was a male character, it wouldn't be seen as a tantrum, you know? Atanis suddenly tapped Tatia's shoulder and pointed to the sea. Tatia, do you hear that? What's the sea doing? The sound of the waves along the beach had silenced. A low, shushing sound started up as the water line backed out into the sea. Tatia's eyes widened, her face suddenly full of panic. Run to the tower, Atanis. Tatia quickly scooped her arms around Gale's abdomen, lifting her to her feet. She held Gale to her side with a death grip as she began running, forcing Gale's feet to move or be dragged behind. Exhaustion set into Gale's limbs, making them feel heavy and weak. Crying had caused pressure to build in her head, and the sudden change in verticality agitated the feeling. Too fatigued to resist Tatia, she did her best to support her own weight while they ran. When they reached the tower, Tanis sprinted up the ladder with ease, followed by Gale, who was pushed up by Tatia. Gale tried climbing faster, but her eyes were crusted and swollen, making it difficult to see the next rung on the ladder. As she approached the top, Atanis' hands grabbed at Gale, lifting her with ease into the outlook and off to the side of the doorway. Atanis reached down the ladder again, this time grabbing at Tatia until she had gripped her forearms. Once they had locked arms, Atanis quickly got to her feet, pulling Tatia into the outlook and slamming the door shut. From the lookout tower, the three of them could see out the window to the beach. There was a large swell on the sea's surface, quickly growing in height and speed. The sky had darkened with the time of day, making it difficult to accurately judge how large the swell had become. "Oh my goodness, it's gonna hit us!" Atanis shrieked and backed away from the viewing window. Scouts spent their days watching the sea's movements and knew the capability waves had to damage anything in their wake. How capable the tower was at taking the hit was the scarier unknown. "Let's find a way to brace ourselves. The tower may fall, but the lookout could stay intact. What do you have in here, Tanis? What do you have in here?" No, I'm going to ignore that one. Tatia's eyes darted around the messy lookout, looking for anything with a strong foundation. It quickly became apparent that Atanis used the tower as a sort of storage room. So many small treasures and miscellaneous objects strewn about haphazardly. Atanis was already shuffling through a pile in one corner of the lookout. "I have a rope. We could tie ourselves to the support beams of the lookout walls, but we need to hurry." She fished out a few rounds of rope and tossed one to Tatia. Gale was still staring at the incoming swell when Tatia grabbed her arm and pulled her over to the wall. Faster than Gale could track, Tatia had the rope wrapped around each of their waists, laced around the support beam, and tied off. Across the room, Atanis had tied herself to the opposing beam, bracing for the impact. Not a moment sooner, the crest of the wave peaked in height, creating a wall of water propelling itself toward the lookout. The lip of the wave plunged over the crest like lips closing a mouth. The wave collapsed over the tower, white water colliding with the cliffside of the beach. From within, the women could hear the cracking and snapping of the wood posts holding up the tower. Tatia used her arm to shield Gale's face as she yelled, "Turn away from the window, it's going to break." The glass shattered from the pounding and pressure of the water, allowing the waves to seize the lookout and all its treasures. And that is the end of chapter 2. So, again, they're very short chapters, but my goal was to make them very meaningful and quick-paced. Because I have an ADHD brain, books that go too slow for me lose my attention very fast. So having a story that is immediately jumping into action, that is establishing how the world works, but is also gaining momentum into the story is useful for me, though it is not always easy for other people to jump into something like that. It's definitely where my brain goes. My brain gets a little too exhausted at the very beginnings of stories that just sit there and use 3 chapters to establish the world. So, with that being said, any thoughts on chapter 2? I'll let you type while I drink my tea. I will say, I think that chapter 2 is a little bit smoother, but I definitely need to fix a lot of that really aggressive self-hate. And if you haven't seen, I did start the story map, and I have here 1 and 2, Gale being a new second-born and unable to find her patron. And on 2, the hurricane that exposes Gale's patron's statue, causing unrest. So, definitely looking at what actions are helping to get to this climax over here. Dad forgot to close his snacks. Yeah, I like your note there. The goal was to make her both optimistic, but at a point where she feels like she's got learned hopelessness, which is something that most Americans, I wouldn't even just say Americans, a lot of people in very manipulative societies have. They have learned hopelessness where I could do this, but nothing's going to get done about it. Like, I could go to protests and rallies and show my support for different minorities and against discrimination, but ultimately my vote barely matters. The government's going to do whatever they want. I don't have control, right? It's that learned hopelessness that Gale is quick to fall on. So, going through character development, looking at her behavior, the biggest main behavior that just happened was her learned helplessness causing her to just kind of want to drift back out to sea. She had kind of suicidal ideation there, and it's a bit of a fight for her. And if you'll notice, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Freeze is highlighted. I already know that she's a character who's going to accept where she's at when she's at and do the best that she can with that situation, but ultimately it causes her to make decisions that aren't necessarily the best in that situation. So, freezing, like, just let the water envelop me, just let me die. And then they're like, no, we're gonna go now. So, I might write that in as an antecedent behavior and consequence. The consequence of her learned hopelessness is that she doesn't value her life as much. I think I spelled it right. Helplessness, no, hopelessness. The antecedent being failure. Or failure to thrive. That's a big one. You like the helplessness? Alright, I'll go with helplessness. Learned helplessness. So yeah, her failure to thrive has caused her to activate her learned helplessness, and the consequence is that she just doesn't value her life as much as she should. It's good, yeah. But this is one of those situations where using tools like this is a growing matter, right? Is looking at all of your ABCs on the behavior chart and kind of going through it as you develop your character. You'll see patterns, and you'll also see when you throw in a behavior that doesn't make sense. Like, let's say that learned helplessness is one behavior. She starts, maybe talking badly about herself, or she starts becoming very lazy and not really putting a lot of effort into things. But then suddenly I give her a behavior where she's willing to fight people, right? That doesn't make sense with the character that I've established. And having a chart like this where I can watch those trends and patterns, I can either make that something that could be a natural graduation into a more violent nature where I've put in the growth needed for her to start standing up for herself and fighting for herself. But right now, she's not a fighting character. She's not someone who values her life enough to stand up for herself, to argue with people, to do any of that. She's just riding that wave of what's happening. And what is the term we just learned on the last podcast? It's the one where you realize that you are not living your own life, but instead the decisions have been made for you. I can't quite remember what that term was, but that's kind of where she's at right now. She's just doing what others tell her to do because she hopes that it'll help somehow. But yeah, definitely rough, definitely needing a bit of help in terms of gracefully bringing in the toxic masculinity and the society that she came from rather than being so forward about it. And this is one of the reasons too why for myself personally, I do not like releasing chapters as I write them. I would rather have either groupings of chapters or an entire story already written and start releasing it, because maybe I make changes and now there's continuity errors, or maybe I was too aggressive and I needed time to sit on it and come back and find a more graceful way of presenting the society she was coming from and the mindset she's coming from. So that's my personal reason why I don't release chapters chapter by chapter by chapter. But I definitely think like 10 chapters at a time would be nice, which is why I wanted to start this workshop. Is I just finished chapter 9 and I don't like it. I don't like what happened. I don't think that it was graceful enough. I think something happened and I just went wrong. So I'll need help kind of figuring that out, and this is the start of that. So yeah. Anyway, any last thoughts that you want to give me before we go ahead and end? That was like 2 hours. I wish I could have background music, but it'd probably get copywritten. Aren't you a cutie pie? Yeah, I know. Thank you. I think honestly one of the most interesting things about this story in general are the other mini stories of the women and how they got there. I'm not gonna lie, I'm having so much fun with it. I don't even know when the next one comes in. I definitely give you information on Lydia. So Lydia, you'll notice one of the cool things that I've been trying to do and make sure I do is when we have a second born, I try to use their lingo from the decade that they were born. I try to give them age appropriate names for whatever decade they were born within. And also give them kind of like personalities that would fit, right? So Atanis, she's very upbeat, very like peppy and bubbly and happy. And that's because as a kid, she saw war. And then she very much was able to turn that around, become an American citizen, and do all these amazing things with her ability to use language, right? So for her, Atanis, it made sense. I have Lydia's coming up as well. Lydia is our very stoic kind of dorm mate. She is a second born, but she's not yet in Amazon. She's just farther down the line. And so you'll get her story, which is beautiful, I think. I like a tear as I wrote it. And then we'll also get into some other characters that you haven't met yet who are on the island, and they all have different patrons as well. So it's kind of nice to see how different patrons have affected them on the island and how connected they are with them as well. That'll also come up in some later chapters. But because the chapters are short, we can go through at least 2 of them in this like 2-hour segment, and I'm really excited to show them off and share them, and also kind of go through the fixing process and hopefully help people fix their current stories when they get stuck and they end up hitting a wall. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and end stream. Thank you so much for being here, Beat. Storm had to go off because his COVID is a little more intense than mine right now. And I'm sure I'll get there. It's fine. It's all fine. Or I'll just sick inside, right? But I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. And yeah, keep thinking on anything that you noticed. And if you want to send me tips on what you're personally thinking on Discord, you are totally free to. Like I said, I haven't really written since high school. And the reason being is just I just need more time to focus on stuff like this because I don't like releasing chapter by chapter. But it's all good. Thank you. I'll see you later. Bye.